This is one of the weirdest, most fun science experiments that's been conducted. And it's been done on everything from rats to birds, insects to primates. And discover why it's a weird and wonderful way to find out if an animal recognizes itself. And it was developed in 1970 by psychologist Gordon Gallup Jr. The way it works is scientists put a harmless, invisible mark on an animal's body. And this mark is put somewhere the animal cannot normally see, such as on their face or head. Then the animal is led to a mirror and its reaction is observed. When he worked with NYU and the Max Planck Institute for Psychology in Germany. All have stared into a mirror, some with surprising results. In today's episode, we look at the surprising creatures that have passed the mirror test. The chimps were first taught to recognize themselves by touching their own genitals while saying a phrase like touch your penis or touch your vulva. After several months of training, the chimps passed the test and were able to identify marks placed on their bodies. However, those that have shown a clear understanding of their own reflection, they use their tusks to feel the mark and seem to be quite inquisitive. In fact, some have even shown signs of shyness when looking in the mirror, suggesting a complex understanding of themselves and their appearance. This might be because elephants spend a lot of time in the water and are used to seeing themselves reflected in the water without thinking much about it. Additionally, elephants love to cover themselves with dirt and mud, so they might not pay much attention to marks on their bodies. In one study, a group of researchers used a mirror to observe the behavior of 5 captive orcas. Eurasian magpies are highly intelligent birds, and they were the first non-mammal to pass the mirror test. The researchers marked each orca with a fluorescent marker and recorded their responses. All 5 orcas spent a significant amount of time looking at the mirror and investigating the marks on their bodies. So while it's a great way to tell if an animal has some level of self-awareness, it doesn't tell us how much self-awareness it has. Despite their small size and simple nervous systems, recent research suggests that some species of ants can recognize themselves in mirrors. It also raises questions about how ants and other insects process visual information and how they recognize themselves in a mirror. Despite their size and relative lack of study, there is some evidence that manta rays can recognize themselves in a mirror. The ants were initially confused by the mirror, but eventually began to investigate the marks on their bodies. By observing how animals interact with mirrors and marks placed on their bodies, scientists can gain an insight into their cognitive abilities and understanding of their own existence. Specifically, the ants seem to focus on their own face and would attempt to clean it off by rubbing against objects or other ants. As technology advances and our understanding of animal cognition grows, we may find that even more creatures are capable of recognizing themselves in a mirror. The manta rays were initially curious about the mirror and would swim up to it to investigate. When the manta rays saw their own reflection, they would turn around and inspect the area behind them, as if trying to locate the source of the reflection. Others argue that it is simply a sign that the brain has developed the ability to process visual information and recognize patterns. And it's interesting to compare this ability to the mirror test abilities of other animals. If you did, please consider subscribing and leaving a comment below. And if you want to learn more about intelligence in animals, you might enjoy the video on animal languages. Thanks for watching. Although this behavior is not conclusive evidence of self-recognition, it is suggestive of a level of self-awareness. How do humans do in the mirror test? At first, toddlers do and recognize themselves in the mirror and they might think that the baby in the mirror is another person. But after a few months, they start to understand that the reflection is themselves and they become curious about their own reflection. This behavior suggests that ants can recognize themselves in a mirror and that they understand that the reflection is part of their own body. One famous study showed that bottlenose dolphins would inspect marks on their bodies in a mirror, suggesting that they recognize their own reflection. In one study, a team of researchers from the University of Oxford marked magpies with a dot of black or red paint and then placed them in front of a mirror. The magpies were initially curious about the mirror, but soon began to investigate the marks on their bodies. They would stare at the mirror for extended periods and try to remove the mark by rubbing against objects or preening their feathers. These behaviors suggest that the magpies understood that the reflection was themselves and that they were trying to remove the mark from their own bodies. This has led some researchers to suggest that the mirror test may not be suitable for orangutans or that they may lack self-awareness. So what exactly is the mirror test. It's also known as the mark test or mirror self-recognition test. But will it try to touch, inspect, or remove the mark? Once they learned to do this, the researchers placed a mark on the dolphins and observed their reactions. The dolphins reacted with curiosity and seemed interested in inspecting the mark on their bodies, suggesting that they understood that they were looking at themselves. If it does, this is considered evidence of mirror self-recognition. And you might think it's a complicated, high-tech test, but it's actually a very simple test. Chimpanzees, bonobos, gorillas, and orangutans have all shown evidence of self-recognition. If the animal sees a mark on its own face in the mirror, it seems reasonable to assume that the animal will realize that the reflection is itself and that it must therefore have some level of self-awareness. And this behavior suggests that the animal has a concept of itself as an individual separate from the environment and other individuals. Essentially, the test checks whether the animal can recognize itself in the mirror and determine if it has any idea that it's looking at itself. It's a brilliant method, but it's important to note that it doesn't necessarily measure the degree of self-awareness. Anyway, now that we know how it works, let's take a look at some of the animals that have taken the test. The great apes are undoubtedly the most famous to take the mirror test. A classic study published in 1999 showed that chimpanzees could recognize themselves in the mirror after years of training. Orangutans, meanwhile, have shown mixed results. While some have passed the test, others seem to hesitate or display aggression towards their reflections. Gorillas, on the other hand, are notoriously difficult subjects to work with, and not all of them have passed the test. Elephants are known for their intelligence, and many have passed the test, displaying remarkable understanding of their own bodies. However, not all elephants pass the test, and some even seem to ignore their own reflection. Dolphins are highly intelligent creatures, and many species have taken the mirror test. In this experiment, the dolphins were first trained to touch a target with their nose while looking at their reflection. Orca whales are the largest member of the oceanic dolphin family and have also shown signs of self-recognition in the wild. Although these studies were small, they provide evidence that orcas are capable of recognizing themselves in a mirror. Magpies are known for their problem-solving skills, and their ability to recognize themselves in a mirror is a testament to their intelligence. The fact that magpies can pass the mirror test has led some researchers to believe that self-awareness may have evolved independently in different parts of the animal kingdom, including birds. Ants are social insects that live in colonies with other ants and communicate through chemical signals. In one study, researchers from the University of California, Berkeley marked ants with a fluorescent marker and placed them in front of a mirror. The fact that ants can pass the mirror test is surprising because it suggests that self-awareness may not require a complex nervous system or large brain. Manta rays are a type of stingray that live in coastal waters and are known for their graceful movements through the water. In one study, a team of researchers from the University of Queensland in Australia placed a mirror in the water and observed the behavior of manta rays swimming nearby. Overall, the mirror test is a remarkable tool for understanding animal intelligence and self-awareness. While not all animals pass the test, those that do demonstrate a level of intelligence and self-awareness that was once thought to be unique to humans. So the next time you see an animal staring into a mirror, remember that it may be looking back at itself and wondering the same thing that you're wondering: who's that? Now, before we end, I want to answer a question that I'm sure some of you are wondering about. And the answer is that human toddlers typically pass the test around the age of 18 months. Some researchers believe that the ability to recognize oneself in the mirror is a sign of more advanced cognitive abilities, such as self-awareness and the ability to understand one's own thoughts and feelings. Regardless of the exact mechanism behind the development of self-recognition, it's clear that this ability is a significant milestone in the development of human infants. So I hope you enjoyed learning about the mirror test, and I hope you learned something new.